You tell me this is okay? This guy just stuck my entire burst. Just play better, I guess, but... GTP though! Wait, what? With every release, it seems like MiHoYo find a new way to throw drawback at every character. With Ganyu followed by Xiao followed by Hutao, each character having more issues than the previous. And if you think Eula was somehow different, well, I have sad news, and she's the new princess of Caveat, even more than Hutao. Starting with the summary, Eula is a fine character, a 3 out of 5 for me though, although I really wanted to rate her slightly lower. Her damage is definitely there, and she cleared content fine, although without a belt she is definitely not as strong as Ganyu, or Hutao, or perhaps even Xiao. I do find her really fun to play personally, so you can definitely pull her if you like playing her or if you just like her design. I'm not trying to disencourage anyone from pulling her because they like her. However, I think it is also important to acknowledge her issues, or as one would say, caveat. While Eula does a respectable amount of damage and have amazing burst damage, her main caveat include low stagger value, Eula being clunky, Eula being squishy, too many counter matchup, very dependent on invested support, very energy hungry with an 80 cost elemental burst, backloaded being a huge issue, being able to miss your elemental burst is a huge issue, not critting on your burst is fucking GG, 50% of her damage being loaded into her elemental burst is a fucking horrible idea. Now, you might have seen a lot of people hit ridiculous large number with her elemental burst. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, if 50% of your entire damage is in that elemental burst, you better fucking hit some big ass number. To be honest, Eula is very complicated to min-max, much harder than previous character like Hutao, and thus making her potential very hard to evaluate. Similar to how it's not until a month later that people realize Xiao is actually a on-field enabler, not a hyper carry DPS. I would dare to even say that this video might be slightly too early to release, however, I know a lot of you are eager to roll and are curious to know if she is good, if she deserves your primo, and so here I am to save your primo gem. Before we take a deep dive, I would like to remind you to subscribe and follow my Twitch because it seems like not a lot of people like to talk about drawback nowadays. Starting with the basics, Eula normal attack 5 times, but the last one is very slow to come out, making it very not worth using. So in general, you would just want to attack 4 times and then dash cancel, and then attack 4 times and then dash cancel. This is true even if you're using her elemental burst, aka her Bankai form. If possible, try to make sure you finish the entire combo because it is a lot of damage on the 3rd and the 4th hit. Popping's Eula elemental skill is just a quick slash. There isn't really much to comment here except the fact that it gives you a Grimheart stacks. Now these stacks will also increase her defense and more importantly interrupt resistance by a good amount, which we'll talk about later. Holding your elemental skill will consume this stack and do a massive amount of damage on top of reducing the enemy physical resistance as well as crowd resistance. Now holding Yi put your elemental skill on a 10-second cooldown. There's almost no reason to ever hold Yi outside of your elemental burst unless for somehow you cannot get your elemental burst within the next 10 seconds. For her elemental burst, she'll do this giant Bankai animation and then it will summon this little sword around her. Each normal attack or elemental skill that you do from now on will add a stack onto that sword. And finally, after exactly 7 seconds, it will explode and do a huge amount of damage. Your combo is tap Yi into elemental burst, and then you would first attack 4 times and then hold your elemental skills and then attack 4 times again for a total of 12 to 13 stacks. Do keep in mind that your elemental burst is 50% of your damage, so you do want to try to push for as many stacks as possible. Now a lot of you might be wondering, don't you want to hold the elemental skill to get the shred off first to do more damage on your normal attack? Now, as it turned out, since your stacks is a majority of your damage and doing it this way gives you more stacks, this does end up resulting in more damage. However, most importantly, because holding your elemental skills will consume your Grimheart stacks, and Grimheart stacks give you defense and interrupt resistance, being able to keep onto those Grimheart for a bit longer actually helped Eula a lot in terms of getting her damage out as well as being less squishy than she is. There's a major issue with Eula stacks overlapping. Here you can see that my elemental skills and my normal attack hit the enemy at the exact same time. Now because you cannot get more than 1 stacks within 0.1 seconds, one of these stacks end up not being counted and thus I lose stacks on my elemental burst damage. However, a quick W tap after holding your elemental skill will simply fix this issue by desynching your normal attack and your elemental skills. A lot of people like to think that she's free-to-play friendly, and to that I say yes and no. She is very easy to get started. Just pair her with any electro characters and then you can left click on her and you can get very far just from left clicking. However, doing this is certainly not better than other character, even a C0 Razors who is also a just left click characters. While it is true that her team does not require popular support like Xingqiu's or Bennett, do know that you will need investment on your support in order to properly bring out Eula's potential and make her on par with other 5-star character. This is mostly because, again, 50% of her damage is loaded into her elemental bursts, which have a lot of ridiculous condition on it. Now, while bringing a electro support is almost certainly a necessary, bringing a cryo battery is a must, and a high invested cryo battery nonetheless. Starting with Diona, you will for certain want a high refinement sacrificial bow or a Phoneus bow, high refinement being a key word. At refinement 1, not only does have low chance, but also the cooldown is at 30 seconds, which is just way too long for Eula to rotate, and therefore R1 sacrificial bow will not cut it. Minimally, you're looking at R3 or potentially even higher. Similarly, same issue with Phoneus. At low refinement, the chance is just too low and the cooldown is just too long. And as you can see, I have a R4 Phoneus warbow, and this is why I can make my Diona work. Let's go for other cryo battery as well, whether it be Rosaria or Kaya. Rosaria will require high refinement Phoneus lens, as you can see, which I have a R5 off. And similarly, if you're running Kaya, you will need a high refinement Phoneus sword, which I do have a R3 off. Now what you could do is of course put multiple Phoneus weapon or sacrificial into your party to help battery that Eula. However, do recall that both of these weapons are gacha weapon, meaning that not every free-to-play player will have these kind of weapon available to their support. However, even more importantly, Eula is actually surprisingly very squishy, meaning you do need a high investment support like Zhongli who can properly protect your Eula, or maybe a very high investment Diona, potentially with high Constellation as well to once again protect your Eula. Eula is surprisingly very squishy, mostly due to the fact that because you want to push through with your combo to do as much damage as possible. Missing out an attack on Eula not only mean that you lose normal attack damage, however it also means you lose a stack on your elemental burst, making missing attack just more detrimental on Eula in general. Especially true since Eula's 3rd and 4th attack have a lot higher multiplier than the 1st and the 2nd, with the 3rd hit being multi-hit, which means you lose 2 stacks if you miss that attack on top of the damage that you're losing. One other thing about Eula is despite being a Claymore character, she surprisingly have very low stagger value. Essentially, every character have a predetermined stagger value that determine how well they stagger. Here you can see like character like Diluc have about almost 100 on each of his normal attack, while character like Diona is only at 12, and this explains why Diluc can stagger so much better than Diona. A character like Xiao can even hit 225 during his elemental burst, and as you can see, during Xiao's elemental burst, you can infinite CC enemy very easily because of this. With a character like Diluc, you can easily knock them back or stagger them using just my normal and E combo. However, this is completely not the case for Eula. Coming back to the same fat guy, here you can see that no matter how I attack him, I just cannot push him back and stagger him at all. Staggering is very important because when the enemy is being staggered, they cannot hit you and therefore you do not take damage. And since I cannot do that on Eula, the fat guy can just hit me for free with absolutely no regard. And again, in comparison to the previous free character, Hutao's had a charge attack who can do much better than that, while Ganyu can just easily attack from the range of safety. Speaking of which, all 3 previous characters also have a way to deal with shield, while Eula absolutely does not, especially considering the Lu who can light the shield on fire still have a better way to deal with shield. It is hard to comment how much this matters since we don't have shield enemy in the current Abyss. We also of course have the new Abyss LECTOR unit, and oh boy, they're absolutely terrible to fight against as Eula. Since Eula heavily dependent on her elemental burst, these energy draining balls are much more deadly for Eula. Eula's poor cryo application mean that she is completely useless against the Abyss LECTOR and is fully dependent on her teammate to break the shield. And of course, if you bring a electro character for superconduct, that is another useless character against the shield, putting all your responsibility on your 2 other member, one of which is probably your cryo battery, like Diona. Against this Geo LECTOR, my Diluc can at least do something against their shield by using my Pyro Infused auto attack as well as my Searing Onslaught slowly stripping them away. Not to mention, in a Diluc team, I can easily and comfortably put in a Bennett which helped me break the shield a lot faster. And one can argue that, oh, what if I just put Bennett in? And while you could do that, you just lose too much value on Bennett. Eula Elemental Burst take way too long to pop to the point where it's impossible to get a Bennett buff Elemental Burst on Eula. Now, you could pop it early, but you'll be losing stacks, so just put Bennett on your other team. In fact, putting 50% of your damage into an Elemental Burst is just fundamentally a bad design, a very poor one nonetheless. And again, you might have seen people hit ridiculous large number on Eula Elemental Burst, and I'm gonna say this once again, if 50% of your power budget is in that Elemental Burst, you better hit some big number. Eula have a ridiculous 80 energy cost on her Elemental Burst, which is one of the highest within all the carries so far, with the Luke being only 40 and Hutao being 60. However, the energy issue is actually not as big as it seems. With a almost perfect rotation and very good support, you can get away with 130 to 140 energy recharge. If you want to be slightly more comfortable, you're looking at the 150 to 160 songs. Eula Elemental Burst taking too long to come out make it impossible to pre-funnel energy into an Elemental Burst. Compared to Xiao, who also have Yao problem but can pre-funnel by first casting 2 of his elemental skill followed by his elemental burst and then get the energy afterward. Going back to the elemental burst, having 50% of your damage come out on a 7-second delay all at once is just a so bad design. Many things can go wrong in 7 seconds. Going back to this infamous clip that we have seen a million times, you can see how the Whopper Flower perfectly just ducked all of my elemental burst and then reappear a second later. There's very little control I can do over that, and so I just lost 50% of my damage for no reason. And here where the mages is teleported out of the elemental burst. Or perhaps the Geo Bishop jumping out of the way? Huh. Eula just have way too many counter matchup, and I'm not just talking about high physical resistance enemy like the Rune Guard. Taking a look at the current Abyss, in the first chamber we have 2 Geo Bishop, which not only have high physical resistance but also push you around and interrupt you like crazy. The Whopper Flower and Geo Bishop all have a way to get out of your elemental burst as well, as you have seen so many times already. And then we move to Troll Free, where the Abyss Lector is kinda hard for her, and the Assassin Mage can easily teleport out. And with low Eula stagger value, you cannot even stagger the Assassin Mage reliably enough to get your Elemental Burst off consistently. And then we move to floor 11. Now, while this floor have physical damage increase, the problem is once again 50% of your damage on Eula is from her Elemental Burst. And guess what? There's a slowing water in this floor, meaning that if you do not one-shot or one rotation everything in this floor, you will never be able to recharge your Elemental Burst back up because of your support will have infinite cooldown. And because it all come out at once, if you didn't crit, you should just quit. Even if you have 99% crit rate, not critting on that one single attack means that you did not crit on 50% of your damage. Aside from that, Eula Elemental Burst just have a few more consistency issue, like her burst is big but it's not big enough. You can see that this treasure hoarder exactly stood outside my Elemental Burst radius, so I did no damage. In comparison with my Dilute, I can easily hit everything just by standing at the edge and throwing my Elemental Burst at it. Overkilling is also a huge issue related to backloaded damage on Eula. Going back to the previous clip, you can see how my Elemental Burst does so much damage that it's basically just one-shotted the guy right here. Since it already one-shot him, my best play here is actually to run away from him and into the group to ensure that my burst hit as many people as possible. Now while I say that now, during actual playtime there's no way for me to know how many damage my burst will do and if it will be enough to kill him, and so therefore I have to keep attacking him to ensure that he will die, and therefore I wasted that entire burst potential. To demonstrate using MS Paint, suppose you can kill this guy easily using 4 normal attack plus your Elemental Burst at 6 stacks. So what you can do is attack this guy 4 times and then attack this guy for 3 times for let's say a total of 7 stacks, and then just pop your Elemental Burst for your AoE between these two. However, because your Elemental Burst come out later, at the time of playing there's no way you will know if you are capable of killing them. So what you end up doing is instead of attacking 3 times, you just attack this guy for 7 times or 7 stacks. And so you're losing potential damage on other target because you are not aware that you are overkilling. Once again, having a huge portion of your damage come out at a 7-second delay and you do not get any feedback about it is just horrible design. Not to mention your Elemental Burst can miss and your Elemental Burst cannot crit, and it just feels so bad when those happen. Surely you can say missing burst on hutao or not critting on it also sucks, but it's not the same degree. If you miss a burst on hutao or whatever, you can still do a lot of charge attack. On Eula, it's actually just half your damage gone. Use some deciding term here, which I do have some knowledge of. This is called a instant feedback. When you click a button on your phone, you expect something to happen. Whether or not the phone instantly gives you the results, or perhaps it tells you that it is loading, there is some kind of feedback, and that is called a feedback loop. This does not happen with Eula, and it's like Eula is lagging. Eula definitely have the damage to rival other 5-star characters like Xiao, or even arguably better than Bay Price the Luke. However, the delivery method is the problem. To actually unlock that damage potential, you have to go through a lot, and there's no guarantee you can even hit those numbers. And finally, we can quickly go over some build advice for you. However, I do not want to make that the main focus of this video. Starting off with the weapon, any of the 5-star weapon is good. Wolf Gravestone is equivalent to the Pine weapon, so just use whichever one you have. You don't have to roll for the Pine at all if you have Wolf Gravestones already. It is no point unless you really want to whale the heart. Skyward Pride is a really good weapon on her, especially with the energy recharge substat, meaning that you do not have to build ER on your artifact at all. For 4-star, always Serpent Spine. If you have it, it's just absolutely the best weapon and it's the most broken weapon in the Battle Pass. However, for free-to-play option, I actually recommend the Prototype over the Snow Tomb. Even though the Snow Tomb have a physical damage bonus, these prototypes simply just have similar performance except being way more consistent than the Snow Tomb, even though technically it could do more damage. As for your artifact, 4 Pale Flame is definitely the best, especially if you have C2 to upkeep the stacks. If you don't have good 4-piece Pale Flame, using 2 Bloodstained 2 Pale Flame is a really good option. You don't really lose that much damage compared to 4 Pale Flame. Or you could use the 2 Gladiator, 2 Bloodstains or Pale Flame as well. The one with better substats usually is better. For substat, personally I would actually prioritize energy recharge first. The sweet spot you want to hit is about 140%, and then finally crit rate and then crit damage or attack percent. Now, even if you're low on ER, it is actually totally not worth to use a ER sense, and you should just still use a attack percent sense. The reason being you just lose way too much damage, and that's why you should prioritize ER substat. In terms of talent, you can level your elemental burst and your normal attack equally, and you can just leave your elemental skill at 6. However, I would recommend you first level your elemental burst since it is a much bigger damage portion than your normal attack is. For Teamcomp right here is one of the most standard comp running double cryo battery. Building Rosaria with high crit rate allow you to easily proc your Phoneus lens, as well as crit share to your Eula with her passive. You can replace Rosaria with Kaya if you do not have Rosaria. However, Rosaria will perform much better at Constellation 2 or beyond, and especially at Constellation 6. If your Rosaria have enough investment to battery Eula, replacing this Diona with Zhongli is one of the best things you can do. Zhongli bring an insane amount of comfort to Eula, which she desperately need, and if you have additional Phoneus lens, putting that on your Zhongli as well will help a lot in battering in Eula. Now, some of you might be thinking, with C6 Rosaria and Zhongli, I already have enough physical threat that maybe I don't need Fischl for Superconduct, and that is only partly true. Well, you can replace Fischl. Fischl is still going to be one of the best support, as at even extreme scenario, Superconduct still outweigh a lot of the support option. Double Geo is doable, however I heavily recommend against it unless you have very high investment. The 15% from the Geo Resonance is actually nothing because Eula have a lot of damage percent by being a physical carry, and so you'll have a lot of physical damage percent. Finally, Firework Beidou is probably one of the strongest comp in terms of overall team damage. However, it will require a very high investment for every one of them. Beidou's Elemental Burst can provide damage reduction as well as, most importantly, increase the character resistance to interruption, which is huge on Eula, once again similar to Zhongli. As a final remark, once again, I'm not trying to disencourage anyone from rolling her or playing her if you like her design or if you like her gameplay. She's definitely more than fine and is very balanced and can completely clear any content in the game. As someone who has played Riven for years and have reached Diamond using Riven, I definitely have a lot of fun playing Eula and can say that she is a very good character even though she might not have the potential as ganyu, hutao, or even xiao. I even went as far as making all my Twitch emote Eula. However, that's precisely why I think we should face the issue that Eula have and admit she does have issues, and instead of just blindly ignoring them. Razor Ninja was very generous and forwarded me his C6 Eula with R5 Pine, and even after playing that, I can still say very similar thing about Eula. In fact, each of Eula Constellation are like whatever. C1 Constellation is like 10 to 15 damage increase, which is for sure a nice bonus, and C2 is a very good quality of life, help you upkeep Pale Flame as well as keep you more grip hard stack easier. C3 is very good as it increases your elemental burst by 3 level, and that's where a lot of your damage is. C4 is absolutely useless because for most of your time your elemental burst will pop against enemy with higher than 50% HP. And C5 is like whatever, 3 level on your elemental skills, and C6, while it might look good, in reality, you will never need that many stacks to kill any enemy in the game. In fact, even for Whale, C6 Eula is like so mad because the C6 hutao or C6 xiao can actually do much better than Eula can. This is gonna be the end of the video, and I deeply apologize that this video is much longer than the usual, however we just have a lot to go through. Anyway, I hope to see you guys next time, so don't forget to subscribe, comment, likes, and see ya!